Good afternoon, ladies and gentlemen. I hope you're all having a wonderful day. I'm Robert from El Magnifico Games, and today we are going to continue with our no, we're not. We're going to continue with our normal Wednesday poetry and riddles. Now, usually we would be reading through a novel or some other prose in the middle of the stream, but I don't have one prepared this week. So instead, we are going to just have 2 hours of poetry, which should be pleasant enough. Now, last week we finished on the Nut Brown Maid, and that was part of the Oxford Book of Verse, which we were working through. But before we continue with that, I thought we'd do something which we don't usually do, which is just look at a poem that has been made recently by an amateur and published online. I say an amateur, I don't actually know if the individual is or not, but you know, this isn't the historic poetry we usually look at. So, without further ado, I present you a haiku by Mr. Dave McClay. A nail in the wall, where Dad hung his coat from work, now where I hang mine. That's all it is. Haikus are obviously very short, but quite emotive, I thought, and worth sharing. So, let's carry on with the Oxford Book of English Verse then. So as I say, we left off with the Nut Brown Maid. That was the last poem we looked at, so I will begin with a rereading of it, and then we will move on to more poetry which we haven't seen before. So, this is quite a long poem, so you're aware. And I shall begin. Oh, also be aware that the speaker changes throughout this poem. It goes between he and she And this is, of course, a 15th century poem. Be it right or wrong, these men among on women do complain, affirming this, how that it is a labour spent in vain, to love with well, for never a dell they love a man again. For let a man do what he can, their favour to attain, yet if anew to them pursue their first true lover than, laboureth for naught, for from her thought he is a banished man. I say not nay, but that all day it is both written and said, that woman's faith is, as who saith, all utterly decayed, but nevertheless, right good witness in this case might be laid, that they love true and continue, record the nut-brown maid, which, when her love come her to prove, to her to make his moan, would not but depart, for in her heart she loved but him alone. Then between us let us discuss what was all the manner between them two. We will also tell all the pain is fear that she was in. Now I begin, so that ye may answer. Wherefore all ye that present be, I pray you give an ear. I am the knight, I come by night, as secret as I can, saying, alas, thus standeth the case, I am a banished man. And I your will for to fulfil, and this will not refuse, trusting to show in words few, that men have an ill use, to their own shame, women to blame, and causeless them accuse. Therefore to you I answer now, all women to excuse, mine own heart dear, with you what cheer, I pray you tell anon, for in my mind of all mankind I love but you alone. It standeth so, a deed is due, whereof great harm shall grow, my destiny is for to die, a shameful death I trow, or else to flee, that one must be, none other way I know, but to withdraw as an outlaw, and take me to my bow. Wherefore adieu, mine own heart true, none other rede I can, for I must to the green wood go, alone a banished man. O Lord, what is the world's bliss, that changeth as the moon? My summer's day, in lusty May, is darked before the noon. I hear you say farewell, nay, nay, we depart not so soon. Why say ye so, whither will ye go, alas, what have ye done? And all my welfare to sorrow and care should change, if ye were gone, for in my mind of all mankind I love but you alone. I can believe it, shall you grieve, and somewhat you distrain, but afterwards your pains hard within a day or twain shall soon aslake, and ye shall take comfort to you again. Why should ye aught for to make thought your labour were in vain? And thus I do and pray to you, as heartily as I can, for I must to the greenwood go, alone a banished man. Now sith that ye have showed to me the secret of your mind, I shall be plain to you again, like as ye shall me find. Sith it is so that you will go, I will not live behind. Shall never be said the nut-brown maid was to her love unkind. Make you ready, for so am I, although it were anon, for in my mind of all mankind I love but you alone. Yet I will read to take good heed what men will think and say, of young of old it shall be told that ye be gone away, your wanton will for to fulfil, in greenwood you to play, and that ye might for your delight no longer make delay. Rather than ye should thus for me be called an ill woman, yet would I to the greenwood go, alone a banished man. Though it be sung of old and young that I should be to blame, theirs be the charge that speaks so large in hurting of my name, for I will prove that faithful love is devoid of shame, in your distress and heaviness to part with you the same. And sure although that do not so, true lovers are they none, for in my mind of all mankind I love but you alone. I counsel you, remember how it is no maiden's law, nothing to doubt but to run out to wood with an outlaw, for ye must there in your hand bear a bow ready to draw, and as a thief thus must you live, ever in dread and awe, whereby to you great harm might grow. Yet had I my apologies, yet had I livier than that I had to the greenwood go. I'm sorry, I'm struggling with this word. Let's look it up, since I've had to pause anyway. Did I misspell it? I did. There we go. Lever, I think, if I'm reading that correctly. Preferably rather. Leaf. Beloved, dear, agreeable, ready, willing. So that should be lever. Wonderful. Where was I? And as a thief, thus must you live, ever in dread and awe, whereby to you great harm might grow. Yet had I liefer than that I had to the greenwood go, alone a banished man. I think not, nay, but as you say, it is no maiden's law, but love may make me for your sake, as I have said before, to come on foot to hunt and shoot, to get us meat and store. For so that I your company may have, I ask no more, from which to part it maketh my heart as cold as any stone, for in my mind of all mankind I love but you alone. For an outlaw this is the law, that men him take and bind, without pity hang to be, and waver with the wind. If I had need, as God forbid, what succours could ye find? For sooth I trow, you and your bow for fear would draw behind, and no more avail, for a little avail were in your counsel than, wherefore I'll to the greenwood go, alone a banished man. Right well know ye that woman be but feeble for to fight, no woman heed it is indeed to be bold as a knight. Yet in such fear, if that ye were, with enemies day and night, I would withstand with bow in hand to grieve them as I might, and you to save as women have from deaf men many one, for in my mind of all mankind I love but you alone. Yet take good heed, for ever I dread that ye could not sustain the thorny ways, the deep valleys, the snow, the frost, the rain, the cold, the heat. For dry or wheat we must lodge on the plain, and us above no other roof but a brake bush or twain, which soon should grieve you, I believe, and you would gladly than that I had to the greenwood go, alone a banished man. Sith I have here been parting near with you of joy and bliss, I must also part of your woe, endure as reason is. Yet I am sure of one pleasure, and shortly it is this, that where we be, meseemeth parday, I could not fare amiss. Without more speech, I you beseech that we were shortly gone, for in my mind of all mankind I love but you alone. If ye go thither, ye must consider, when you have lust to dine, there shall be no meat before to geat, neither beer, ale, nor wine, nay wine, nay sheets clean to lie between, that must be sheets, nay sheets clean to lie between, made of thread and twine, no other house but leaves and bells to cover your head and mine. Lo, mine heart sweet, this ill diet should make you pale and wan, wherefore I'll to the greenwood go, alone a banished man. Among the wild deer such an archer as man say that ye be, nay may not fail of good victual, where so great plenty, and water clear of the river shall be full sweet to me, with which in hell I shall right well endure as ye shall see. And all we go, a bed or two I can provide anyone, for in my mind of all mankind I love but you alone. Lo, yet before ye must do more, if ye will go with me, as cut your hair up by your ear, your kirtle by the knee, with bow in hand, for to withstand your enemies if need be. And this same night before daylight to woodward will I flee. If that ye will all this fulfil, do it shortly as ye can, else will I to the greenwood go, alone a banished man. I shall as now do more for you than longeth to the woman heed. 'Tis short my hair, a bow to bear, to shoot in time of need. O my sweet mother, before all other, for you I have most dread. But now adieu, I must ensue where fortune doth me lead, and this make ye, let us flee, the day cometh fast upon, for in my mind of all mankind I love but you alone. Nay, 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 not so, ye shall not go, and I shall tell you why. Your appetite is to be light, of love I well espy, for right as ye have said to me, and likewise hardily, ye should answer, whosoever it were, and way of company, It is said of old, soon hot, soon cold, and so is a woman. Wherefore I to the wood will go, alone, a banished man. If you take heed, it is no need such words to me to say, for oft you prayed, and long essayed, or I loved you, pardie. And though that I of ancestry a baron's daughter be, yet have you proved how I loved you, a squire of low degree, and never shall, whatso befall, to die therefore anon. For in my mind of all mankind I love but you alone. A baron's child to be beguiled, it were a cursed deed. To be for law with an outlaw, Almighty God forbid. Yet better were the poor squire. Just a sec. Yep, I'm not sure, because I was thinking perhaps it's supposed to be squire, but they spelt squire the conventional way above, so presumably not. Where was I? Yet better were the poor squire alone to forest yeed, than ye shall say another day that by my cursed rede ye were betrayed. Wherefore, good maid, the best rede that I can is that I to the greenwood go, alone a banished man. Whatever befall, I never shall of this thing of this thing be upbraid. But if ye go and leave me so, then have ye me betrayed. Remember ye well how that ye dealt. For if ye, as ye said, be so unkind to leave behind your love the nut-brown maid, trust me truly that I shall die soon after ye be gone, for in my mind of all mankind I love but you alone. If that ye went ye should repent, for in the forest now I have purveyed me of a maid whom I love more than you. Another more fair than ever ye were, I dare it well avow, and of you both each should be wroth with other as I trow. It were mine ease to live in peace, so will I if I can. Wherefore I to the wood will go, alone a banished man. Though in the wood I understood ye had a paramour, all this may naught remove my thought, but that I will be your. And she shall find me soft and kind, and courteous every hour, glad to fulfil all that she will command me to my power. For had ye, lo, 100 mo, yet would I be that one, for in my mind of all mankind I love but you alone. Mine own dear, I see the proof that ye be kind and true, of maid of wife in all my life, the best that I ever knew. The best that ever I knew. Be merry and glad, be no more sad, the case is changed new, for it were ruth that for your truth you should have cause to rue. Be not dismayed whatsoever I said to you when I began. I will not to the greenwood go, I am no banished man. These tidings be glad to me, than to be made a queen. If I were sure they should endure, but it is often seen, when men will break promise they speak, the word is on the spleen. You shape some wile, me to beguile, and steal from me, I ween. Then were the case worse than it was, and I more woe begone, for in my mind of all mankind I love but you alone. You shall not need further to dread, I will not disparage you, God defend, sith you descend of so great a lineage. Now understand, to Westmoreland, which is my heritage, I will bring you, and with a ring, by way of marriage, I will you take, and lady make, as shortly as I can. Thus have you won an earl's son, and not a banished man. Here may you see that women be in love meek, kind, and stable. Let never man reprove them than, or call them variable, but rather pray God that we may to them be comfortable, which sometimes proveth such as he loveth, if they be charitable. For sith men would that woman should be meek to them each one, much more ought they to God obey, and serve but him alone. Very interesting poem, I think, especially given its historical context. Comical in places, perhaps it wasn't intended so, but also endearing in its own way. I apologise about all the mistakes I made. I do seem to be making quite a lot of those this stream, not sure why. Anyway, we'd best move on. So the next poem is As Ye Came from the Holy Land, and it claims to be from the 16th century. As ye came from the Holy Land of Wassingham, met you not with my true love by the way as you came. How should I know your true love that have met many a one, as I came from the Holy Land, that have come, that have gone. She is neither white nor brown, but as the heavens fair, there is none both her form divine in earth or the air. Such a one did I meet, good sir, such an angelic face, who like a nymph, like a queen, did appear in her gait, in her grace. She hath left me here alone, all alone as unknown, who sometimes did me lead with herself, and me loved as her own. What's the cause that she leaves you alone, and a new way doth take, that sometime did love you as her own, and her joy did you make? I have loved her all my youth, but now am old, as you see. Love likes not the falling fruit, nor the withered tree. Know that love is a careless child, and forgets promise past. He is blind, he is deaf, when he list, and in faith never fast. His desire is a jewelless content, and a truthless joy. He is one with a world of despair, and is lost with a toy. Of womankind such indeed is the love, or the word love abused, under which many childish desires and conceits are excused. But true love is a durable fire, in the mind ever burning, never sick, never dead, never cold, from itself never turning. I think that was particularly interesting. A fairly mature subject matter. I mean, it is obviously a romantic poem, and there's many of them. Many of them. But I would say it was a bit more mature and realistic than most of the romantic poetry we've read. Sorry, that is from the... I should have been clearer. When I initially said romantic, I meant that it relates to love. The second time I used it, I was referring to the romantic movement in poetry, which came along, about 300 years later, after this was written. So it's interesting in that way. But something else I find particularly interesting is that I do not recognise the form. It bears some resemblance to a ballad, but there are also some very notable differences. It doesn't seem to be sticking to a precise number of feet per line, nor does it follow the same pattern as a ballad would. I wonder... I'm going to have to check this. Could it be that each pair of lines is forming a 14er? That is 7 feet. That's plausible, isn't it? Let me check. I only counted 12 syllables on the first line. "13 on the next." Sorry, when I said the first line, I meant the first two, and in the next, I meant the next two. Then we get 14 on the next pair. "14 again. "13. "14. Okay. If this was... If this was iambic, they could add a syllable to the end. If it was trochaic, they could dock one. Also, I don't know how Walsingham is pronounced. I assumed it's 3 syllables. If it's 4, then that would bring the first pair of lines up to 13 syllables. What else? Love likes not the falling fruit, nor the withered tree. That's 12. Okay, I'm suitably convinced this isn't 14ers then. Yeah, I think it is just a little bit irregular. Which is interesting. I didn't think they were writing irregular poetry quite that early. It has an A, B, C, B rhyming scheme, like a ballad would. And each line seems to vary between, what, about 6 to 8 syllables-ish, although of Walsingham would only be 4. Anyway, I think we've rather over-analysed this poem at this point. But yeah, it's an interesting one. Did we get an author for this one? I don't think we did. I think we're still on anonymous. Yes, yes, we are. Okay, moving on. The lover in winter plaineth for the spring. Looks like they believe this is 16th century, but they're not sure. Also by Anonymous. O western wind, when wilt thou blow, that the small rain down can rain? Christ, that my love were in my arms, and I in my bed again. Again, very, very interesting. It's a lot less structured, or it appears a lot less structured than I was expecting from such early poetry. Quite emotive though. What do they mean by plaineth? Is that like pining? No help from... Oops, sorry. No help from Wiktionary. So... let's try my physical dictionary. don't see plaineth. I do see plaint though, which apparently can be a lamentation or complaint. That wouldn't quite figure though, would it? No. Sadly, I can't find a definition for plaineth. But the lover in winter plaineth for the spring. I think plaineth is almost certainly a longing or pining. I could be wrong, but I suspect it is. So let's read that once more, given how short it is. O western wind, when wilt thou blow, that the small rain down can rain? Christ that my love were in my arms, and I in my bed again. I must say, this is impressive stuff for the time. I mean, in many ways, it seems quite analogous to the Japanese haiku, which we started this stream with. It doesn't follow the structure of it, the 5 syllables followed by 7 followed by 5, but the idea of, in a very condensed space, trying to conjure up powerful emotions to the extent that it can even seem jarring. I think it certainly does that. Another thing is that in formal haikus, that is those that follow the structure rigorously, they are supposed to always reference a season. They can do so indirectly by referencing the weather if they or something else. They don't have to explicitly use a word for one of the seasons, but that's what haikus are supposed to do. In fact, they're supposed to, at least in English, they're supposed to create a contrast between something natural and something human. All of that is here. The only thing it doesn't follow is the syllabic structure of a haiku, but it really is in many ways analogous. Again, we have an A, B, C, B rhyming scheme, like we did in the previous poem. This is 14ers. Each line is 7 syllables, and each pair is therefore 14 syllables. Assuming it's using duplex feet, then that makes it a 14er. No, I'm wrong. No, I take that back. I miscounted. Some of these lines have 8 syllables. Okay, so ignore the last comment. That was in error. Anyway, I think we've done this one to death as well. But it is interesting. Perhaps they're wrong about the date. But then again, why would you write in such archaic words unless in a more modern time, unless you were deliberately being obtuse? Still, if this is as early as they claim it is, it's impressive. below. So again, this is by anonymous. They don't know who the author is. 16th century. Below, my babe, lie still and sleep. It grieves me sore to see that thee weep. Wouldst thou be quiet? I'st be glad. Thy mourning makes my sorrow sad. Below, my boy, thy mother's joy, thy father breeds me great annoy. Below, la lo. When he began to court my love, and with his sugrid words me move, his feignings false and flattering cheer to me that time did not appear. But now I see most cruel, he cares nay for my babe nor me. Below, la lo. Lie still, my darling, sleep a while, and when thou wakest thou sweetly smile, but smile not as thy father did to cousin maids, nay, God forbid. But yet I fear thou wilt go near thy father's heart and face to bear. Below, la lo. I cannot choose, but ever will be loving to thy father still, where'er he go, where'er he ride. My love with him doth still abide, in weal or woe, where'er he go. My heart shall ne'er depart him fro. Below, la lo. But do not, pretty mine, to feignings false thy heart incline. Be loyal to thy lover true, and never change her for a new. If good or fair, of her have care, for woman's banings wondrous sair. Below, la lo. Barn, by thy face I will beware, like siren's words I'll come not near. My babe and I together will live, he'll comfort me when cares do grieve. My babe and I right soft will lie, and never respect man's cruelty. Below, la lo. Farewell, farewell, the falsest youth that ever kissed a woman's mouth. I wish all maids be warned by me, never to trust man's courtesy. For if we do but chance to bow, they use us then they care not how. Below, la lo. If I understood that correctly, it's about a woman who was had a child with a man that then left her. If I've understood that correctly. And she still loves him. Seems to be written in rhyming couplets, and we have on most lines 4 feet. And it appears to be written in iambic tetrameter. So this is more structured, like I would have expected from the time of writing. That's not to say that most poems back then were more structured, just that that's what I would have expected, based on my own limited knowledge. If the subject matter is what I conjectured it was, then that's a particularly how would one put it? The subject matter's a little more indelicate than later poets would likely have written about. Of course, nowadays, people write about anything, but I mean, a lot of the poetry we've been looking at has been from Georgian or Victorian times, and I don't think they would have written poetry like that then. I think I'll actually give this one more reading, just to see if I can consolidate my understanding. and then we'll move on to the next one. So, once more. Below my babe lies... Actually, I should prefix this by saying, so my understanding is this is a female speaker. She's talking to a child about the child's father. So, below my babe lie still and sleep. It grieves me sore to see thee weep. Would if thou be quiet, is be glad. Thy mourning makes my sorrow sad. Below my boy, thy mother's joy, thy father breeds me great annoy. Below, lo. When he began to court my love, and with his sugrid words me move, his feignings false and flattering cheer to me that time did not appear. But now I see most cruelly, he cares nay for my babe nor me. Below, lo. Lie still, my darling, sleep a while, and when thou walkest thou sweetly smile, but smile not as thy father did to cozen maids, nay, God forbid. But yet I fear thou wilt go near thy father's heart and face to bear. Below, lo. I cannot choose, but ever will be loving to thy father still. Wherever he go, where'er he ride, my love with him doth still abide. In weal or woe, where'er he go, my heart shall ne'er depart him fro. Below, lo. But do not, pretty mine, to feignings false thy heart incline. Be loyal to thy lover true, and never change her for a new. If good or fair, of her have care, for women's banings wondrous sere. Below, lo. Barn, by thy face I will beware, like sirens' words I come not near. My babe and I together will live, he'll comfort me when cares do grieve. My babe and I right soft will lie, and ne'er respect got man's cruelty. Below, lo. Farewell, the falsest youth that ever kissed a woman's mouth. I wish all maids be warned by me, never to trust man's courtesy. For if we do but chance to bow, they'll use us then they care not how. Below, lo. See, if I'm not mistaken, that's a dirty joke, which again, you wouldn't have seen in later poetry. Then again, let's not forget, this would be Tudor poetry, if the dates are right, and I certainly don't think the Tudors were above being a little lewd. So, The Old Cloak. This is also by Anonymous, so we still don't know who the authors are. This is 16th century ? So they think this is probably written in the 16th century, but they don't know. This winter's weather is waxeth cold, and frost it freezeth on every hill, and Boreas blows his blast so bold, and all our cattle are like to spill. Bell, my wife, she loves no strife. She said unto me quietly, rise up and save cow Crumbock's life. Man, put thine old cloak about thee. O Bell, my wife, why dost thou flight? Thou kens my cloak is very thin. It is so bare and overworn, a crick thereon cannot ren. Then I'll no longer borrow nor lend, for once I'll new apparel be. Tomorrow I'll to town and spend, for I'll have a new cloak about me. Cow Crumbock is a very good cow. She has been always true to the pail, and she has helped us to butter and cheese, I trow, and other things she will not fail. I would be loth to see her pine. Good husband, counsel take of me. It is not for us to go so fine. Man, take thine old cloak about thee. My cloak it was a very good cloak. It hath been always true to the wear. But now it is not worth a groat. I have had it 44 year. Sometime it was of cloth and grain. 'Tis now but a sigh clout, as you may see. It will neither hold out wind nor rain, and I'll have a new cloak about me. It is 44 year ago, syne the one of us the other did ken, and we have had betwixt us two, of children either 9 or 10. We have brought them up to women and men, in the fear of God I trow they be. And why wilt thou thyself mistaken? Man, take thine old cloak about thee. O Bell, my wife, why dost thou flight? Now is now, and then was then. Seek now all the world throughout. Thou kens not clowns for gentlemen. They are clad in black, green, yellow, and blue, so far above their own degree. Once in my life I'll take a view, for I'll have a new cloak about me. King Stephen was a worthy peer. His breeches cost him but a crown. He held them sixpence all to dear. Therefore he called the tailor Lown. He was a king and wore the crown, and thou'st but of a low degree. It's pride that puts this country down. Man, take thy old cloak about thee. Belle, my wife, she loves not strife, yet she will lead me if she can, and to maintain an easy life, I oft must yield, though I'm a good man. It's not for a man with a woman to threep, unless he first give o'er the plea, and he began, so will he keep, and I'll take my old cloak about me. This is historically interesting. I mean, I find it very, very, what's the word, heartwarming's not quite the right expression, but very comforting to note that a lot of the sentiments that we have today are of course repeated here, must be about 500 years ago, 400 to 500 years ago, if this is 16th century. You know, things like, and to maintain an easy life, I oft must yield, though I'm a good man, talking about his wife. It's, well, it's comically endearing. I also found it very interesting that they had quite a long conversation about the cattle and one of their cows called Crumbok. I mean, you don't usually see people writing poetry about such mundane things, but, you know, that would have been life back then. Of course, people would have kept animals, lots of people would have, and of course you have to look after them, and of course they would have grown attached to them. I wasn't expecting that to come up, but, you know, it makes sense. I suppose the only sort of dissonance here is the fact that this was clearly written by a very literate person. You know, in later times you would have expected that the people that were literate wouldn't necessarily have been the people that were keeping the animals themselves. You know, the people that would have been responsible for putting the old cloak on and going out and helping the poor animal with whatever affliction it had. You know, that's what servants were for. But either this was written from the perspective of someone of a lower class than the author, or perhaps back then that's just not the case. Lots of literate people would have had animals. As for its structure, looks broadly iambic to me. O Belle, my wife, why dost thou flight? That's iambic. Mostly tetrameter, but I'm pretty sure I saw some lines with 5 or more feet. What about this one? She has helped us to butter and cheese, I trow. Wait, was that 11? She has helped us to butter and cheese, I trow. Yeah, that was 11. That makes sense, because you'd emphasise the I, and the trow would be a feminine ending, wouldn't it? And it's got an AB rhyming scheme. Yeah, I don't have much more to say about it. Naturally, if anyone wants to discuss any of this more, just leave a comment in chat and we will. But yeah, I think I've said all about I can about this poem. It's interesting. If there is nothing more to say about it, then we'll move on to the next one, to Mistress Margery Wentworth by John Skelton. As always, we will start by having a brief look on Wikipedia as to the author's life, because that can sometimes be important to understanding their poetry, and at the very least it's interesting. John Skelton, also known as John Shelton, possibly born in Diss, Norfolk, was an English poet and tutor to King Henry VIII of England. Skelton died in Westminster and was buried in St. Margaret's Church, although no trace of the tomb remains. Wait, he was a poet laureate. I thought poet laureates were later than that. I didn't realise they had them so early. Like, I really thought they were later than that. That's interesting. Okay, let's have a quick read through the first couple of sections here, his education and what it has to say about him being poet laureate. And then we will get on with the poetry, I guess. So, Skelton is said to have been educated at Oxford, though it is documented that he studied at Cambridge. He could be the one Skelton mentioned by William Cole as taking his MA degree at Cambridge in 1484, but this is unconfirmed. In 1490, William Caxton, in the preface to the Book of Enigmas, compiled by Virgil, refers to him as though Skelton already had a scholarly reputation when the book was published. But I pray Master John Skelton, he says, late created poet laureate in the University of Oxenford, to oversee and correct this said book. For him I know for sufficient to expound and engloss every difficult that is therein, for he have yeah, I don't think that section is going to be particularly useful to understanding his poetry, at least. Poet laureate. In the last decade of the 15th century, he was appointed tutor to Prince Henry, afterwards King Henry the VIII of England. Interesting fact, Henry the VIII was never supposed to be king. He had a elder brother called Arthur, and Arthur was raised to be king. Henry wasn't. Henry was raised to be a noble, but it wasn't expected that he'd ever inherit the crown. I mentioned this because I don't know how relevant that's going to be, but the point is, it doesn't necessarily follow that he would have been tutored by this gentleman were he expected to inherit the throne. I don't know, I'm just, worth bearing in mind. He wrote for his pupil at Lost Speculum Principis and Erasmus. In 1500 dedicated an ode to the prince, speaking of Skelton as unum Britannicarum litterum lumen ac decus. This Latin phrase roughly translates as the one light and glory of British letters. In 1498 he was successfully ordained subdeacon, deacon and priest. He seems to have been imprisoned in 1502, but no reason is known for his disgrace. 2 years later he retired from regular court attendance to become rector of Diss, a benefice he retained nominally until his death. Skelton frequently signed himself Regius Orator and Poet Laureate, but there is no record of any emoluments paid in connection with these dignitaries, although the Abbé de Resnel, author of Recherches sur les Poètes Cossonnes, which I'm doubtless mispronouncing, asserts that he had seen a patent in which Skelton was appointed Poet Laureate to Henry VIII. As rector of Diss, he caused great scandal among his parishioners who thought him, says Anthony Wood, more fit for the stage than the pew or the pulpit. He was secretly married to a woman who lived in his house. Bearing in mind this would have been before the Reformation of the Church, so if he was indeed a priest at the time, then priests were not supposed to marry. And earned the hatred of the Dominican friars by his fierce satire. He consequently came under the formal censure of Richard Nix, the bishop of the diocese, and appears to have been temporarily suspended. After his death, a collection of farcical tales, no doubt chiefly, if not entirely, apocryphal, gathered round his name, the Merry Tales of Skelton. During the rest of the century he figured in the popular imagination as an incorrigible practical joker. His sarcastic wit made him enemies, among them Sir Christopher Garnachet, or Garnies, Alexander Barclay, William Lilly, and the French scholar Robert Gagouin. With Garnies he engaged in a regular flighting, undertaken, he says, as the king's command. at the king's command, but Skelton's 4 poems read as if the abuse in them were dictated by genuine anger. Earlier in his career, he found a friend and patron in Cardinal Wolsey, and the dedication to the Cardinal of his Replication is couched in the most flattering terms, but in 1522, when Wolsey, in his capacity of papal legate, dissolved convocation at St. Paul's, Skelton put in circulation the couplet, "Gentle Paul, lay down thy sword, for Peter of Westminster hath shaven thy beard." Yeah, that looks to be about all that's interesting there. So that is interesting. It sounds like he took a wife when it would have been illegal for him to do so. Well, I say illegal, it depends what you mean by the law. I don't think he could be arrested, but certainly if he was, if he held a priestly, if he was a priest, then he shouldn't have had a wife. And it's interesting that he mixed in royal circles and that he apparently made enemies. Anyway, where were we? To Mistress Marjorie Wentworth. With marjorane gentle, the flower of godlyhood, embroidered the mantle, is of your maidenhead. Plainly I cannot gloss, ye be as I divine, the pretty primrose, the goodly columbine. Benign, courteous, and meek, with words well devised, in you who list to seek, be virtues well comprised. With marjorane gentle, the flower of godlyhood, embroidered the mantle, is of your maidenhood. That's going to take me... that's going to need a little more analysis, I think. Marjorane, marjoram. 3, argue. Okay. It's worth looking up what, if any, significance there are of primroses and of marjoram. Which is why I have this book here. Primrose, childhood. Okie doke. And what was the other one? Marjoram. Looks like we may be out of luck there. Never mind. There we go. So with marjoram gentle, the flower of goodlyhood. Oh, well that's of goodly head. Goodly head, I apologise. Right. Does that just mean being good? Or does it have some other meaning? The character or nature of a goodly person, goodliness. Okay, so that answers our question. That's the significance. With marjoram gentle, the flower of goodlyhood, embroidered the mantle, is of your maidenhead. What do they mean by maidenhead? Do they mean as a sign of her virginity? It would seem so. I don't see any other connotation. Okay. Embroidered the mantle. Okay, what do you mean by mantle? A piece of clothing somewhat like an open robe or cloak, especially that worn by Orthodox bishops. A figurative garment representing authority or status capable of affording protection. Anything that covers or conceals something else, a cloak. Interesting. Alright. So, with marjoram gentle, the flower of goodlyhood, embroidered the mantle, is of your maidenhood. Plainly, I cannot gloss. Okay, no help there. Perhaps it's an archaic spelling of GLOSS? A brief explanatory note or translation of a foreign, archaic, technical, difficult, complex, or uncommon expression inserted after the original in the margin of a document or between the lines of a text. A glossary, a collection of such notes. Okay, this is making more sense now. With margarine gentle, the flower of goodlihood, embroidered the mantle is of your maidenhead. Plainly, I cannot gloss, ye be as I divine, the pretty primrose, the goodly columbine. Okay, so divine here means to be able to predict something. Divination is the pseudo-scientific art of predicting the future, for example. I would guess it probably originally referred to gaining knowledge through spiritual means as opposed to other means, but it can be used more generally just to mean predicting something accurately. So it isn't the other sense of divine, that is the adjectival sense of being godly. The author isn't asserting you are as a god, as am I. They're saying ye be as I divine, as I predict, or as I can tell, the pretty primrose. Right, columbine. Any plant of genus Aquilasia, having distinctive bell-shaped flowers with spurs on each petal. Okie doke. Columbine. Let's look it up here. Are we in luck or not? Columbine. Folly. Interesting. So it's almost what's the expression? Almost patronizing the extent to which the speaker is infantilizing the subject of the poem. Although I'm not sure it was intended that way. It probably just speaks to the way that womanhood and childish innocence were equated in the Christian church for well, certainly for a very long time. I don't know if they still are. Benign, courteous and meek, with words well devised, in you who list to seek, be virtues well comprised, with margarine gentle, the flower of goodlihood, embroidered the mantle is of your maidenhood. So again, looking at the punctuation, there's a comma there and a comma there. That's saying, with margarine gentle embroidered the mantle. So I think that means with gentle margarine embroidered into the mantle. that is the clothing. The robe, which denotes status, is of your maidenhead. So saying that the flower of goodlyhead, the flower of goodlyhead, that is marjoram, denotes your maidenhead, which also implies that her status is itself tied to her virginity. So once more, altogether, with marjoram gentle, the flower of goodlihood, embroidered the mantle is of your maidenhead. Plainly I cannot gloss, ye be as I divine, the pretty primrose, the goodly columbine. Benign, courteous, and meek, with words well devised, in you who list to seek, be virtues well comprised. In you who list to seek, be virtues well comprised. What do I mean by who list to seek? Is this some meaning of the word list I'm not familiar with? This is definitely a verb. To create or recite a list, to place in listings or sew together as strips of cloth so as to make a show of colours or to form a border. I wonder if that could be what they're referring to. To cover with a list or with stripes of cloth, to put list on or stripe as with a list. To plough and plant with lister. What do they mean by seek, if that's what they mean by list? Oh, there's additional etymologies for list, that's worth looking at. Art, craft, cunning, skill. But that's a noun, so it wouldn't be that. To be pleasing to desire, like, or wish. So who wish to seek? I think it's that meaning. I think it means to wish. In you, who wish to seek, be virtues well comprised. So if people are seeking virtues, they can find them in you. That makes sense. Okay, apologies about that. I will actually get back to reading this then. With marjoram gentle, the flower of goodlyhead, embroidered the mantle is of your maidenhead. Plainly I cannot gloss, yet be as I divine, the pretty primrose, the goodly columbine. Benign, courteous, and meek, with words well devised, in you who list to seek, be virtues well comprised. With marjoram gentle, the flower of goodlyhead, embroidered the mantle, is of your maidenhead. So essentially it's just one long poem. Well, it's not a long poem at all, it's one short poem. It's one short poem in praise of a woman's virtues. It has an AB rhyming scheme. I think most of it's in a triameter. It is. I think it's mostly a iambic triameter. Well, now that I understand it, it's quite good for what it is. I don't think its sentiments would be well received nowadays, but it's well composed. It's interesting. And it certainly gets its point across. Just a second. Sorry, where was I? To Mistress Margaret Hussey. So this is presumably also by John Skelton. Bearing in mind that mistress is the feminine form of master, the idea of referring to a man's paramour as his mistress is a bit of a joke at the man's expense. Originally, it was, suggesting that, he's at her beck and call. That was the joke. Mistress itself, as I say, is just the feminine form of master. So to Mistress Margaret Hussey doesn't necessarily imply a romantic relationship of any sort. It may be written in reverence to someone of higher station. So, Merry Margaret, as midsummer flower, gentle as falcon, or hawk of the tower, with solace and gladness, much mirth and no madness, all good and no badness, so joyously, so maidenly, so womanly, her demeaning in everything far, far passing, that I can indite or suffice to write, of Merry Margaret, as midsummer flower, gentle as falcon, or hawk of the tower, as patient and still, and as full of goodwill, as fair Isaphil, Colliander, sweet Pomander, good Cassander, steadfast of thought, well made, well wrought, far may be sought, ere that ye can find so courteous, so kind, as Merry Margaret, this midsummer flower, gentle as falcon, or hawk of the tower. Now the thing that I note is that falcons and hawks aren't well known for being gentle. So I have to wonder if this whole poem is supposed to be interpreted sarcastically. I don't know what the significance of a midsummer flower would be. I don't know if they were considered to be particularly merry or not. Isaphil. That's something we can look up to get some more context. Of course, Wikipedia has nothing. What about Colliander? Still nothing. Cassander? Oh no, technical difficulties. That's not ideal. That's not ideal at all. I think the browser's frozen. Okay, give me a moment. I may have to restart it if this doesn't resolve itself shortly. Yep, the browser seems completely broken. What I'll do for now then is I'll look it up on another device that I happen to have next to me, and I will just read out what I find and we'll just have to wait and see if the browser manages to repair itself or not. Cassander was king of the ancient Greek kingdom of Macedonia from 305 BC until 297 BC, and de facto ruler of southern Greece from 317 BC until his death. A son of Antipater and a contemporary of Alexander the Great, Cassander was one of the Diadochi who warred against Alexander's empire following the latter's death in 323 BC. Cassander later seized the crown by having Alexander's son and heir, Alexander IV, murdered. In governing Macedonia from 317 BC to 297 BC, Cassander restored peace and prosperity to the kingdom, while founding or restoring numerous cities, including Thessalonica, Cassandreia and Thebes. However, his ruthlessness in dealing with political enemies complicates assessments of his rule. So, yes, I think it's fair to say that this poem is certainly meant to be taken sarcastically, which means all these compliments, so joyously, so maidenly, so womanly, her demeaning and everything, which I don't think means she demeans people. I think that's supposed to mean that she lowers herself. She deigns to do things. All this is presumably presumably means the opposite of what it says, which is reasonably insulting. You can see why this gentleman apparently made such enemies. If you'll bear with me 1 second. There we go. And there we go. Sorry, I've got the browser working again now. So, where were we? Merry Margaret, as midsummer flower, gentle as falcon or hawk of the tower. With solace and gladness, much mirth and no madness, all good and no badness, so joyously, so maidenly, so womanly, her demeaning in everything. Far, far passing, that I can indite, or suffice to write, of Merry Margaret, as midsummer flower, gentle as falcon or hawk of the tower. As patient and still, and as full of goodwill, as fair Isaphil, Colliander, sweet Pomander, good Cassander. Steadfast of thought, well made, well wrought, far may be sought, ere that he can find, so courteous, so kind, as Merry Margaret, this midsummer flower, gentle as falcon or hawk of the tower. Now, one thing I do note is it's quite irregular. A fair amount of the poem is written in, I think it's iambic trimeter again. But not all of it by any means. No, I take that back. Most of it isn't. So yes, I can't really detect a consistent meter to it. There is rhyming. Flower and tower, gladness, badness, madness. Still will, is a fill. Coriander, pomander, Cassander, thought, wrought, sought, find, kind. But, again, it's not structured. It's a remarkably unstructured poem, actually. But it seems to work, it seems to flow, even without any strict structure. It's interesting. Anyway, where were we? And now we're on to Stephen Hawes, The True Knight. So who was Stephen Hawes? Popular English poetry in the Tudor period, who is now little known. He was probably born in Suffolk when the surname was common. If his own statement of his age may be trusted, he was born about 1474. That was during the War of the Roses. He was educated at Oxford and travelled in England, Scotland and France. On his return, his various accomplishments, especially his most excellent vein in poetry, procured him a place at court. He was groom of the chamber to Henry VII as early as 1502, which would have made him, what, about 18? No. Sorry, about 28. According to Anthony Wood, he could repeat by heart the works of most of the English poets, especially the poems of John Lydgate, whom he called his master. See, I don't think there was a lot of English poetry at that point, because it wasn't until Chaucer's time, that, which was the middle of the 1400s, that... Sorry, the middle of the 14th century, that is the 1300s, it wasn't until then that English, the language of the common people, resurfaced as a literary medium after the Norman conquest. And I suspect if they were to go back before the Norman conquest, the language would have already changed enough that it would have, not to mention poetic tastes, would have changed a lot, to the point that it wouldn't have... it wouldn't have caught on again to the same extent that Chaucer's legacy did. But my point is, that only leaves about 150 years of English poetry. And that would have only been among a fairly small literate class at the time that could have been producing it. Anyway, where were we? According to Anthony Wood, he could repeat by heart the works of most of the English poets, especially the poems of John Lydgate, whom he called his master. He was still living in 1521 when it is stated in Henry VIII's household accounts that £6, 13 shillings, 4 pence was paid to Mr. Hawes for his play. He died before 1530 when Thomas Field, in his Conversation Between a Lover and a Jay, wrote, "Young Stephen Hawes, whose soul God pardon, treated of love so clerkly and well." Some critics, notably C.S. Lewis, have treated Hawes dismissively. Faculty was what he lacked. There was more and better poetry in him than he could express, referring to his broken-backed metre and dull excursions into the 7 liberal arts. But his metre is not consistently broken-backed. From time to time, though not very often, one encounters sighs that would not have disgraced either Chaucer before him or Spenser after him. The fragrant fumes died well accents out, or misty vapours of perturbation or liquor was her habitation unto a place which is celestial than to a terrain mansion fatal, or by her proper hand soft as ony silk, with Rashid. I might not slake my brennig heart, she the fair dyed make, these dances truly must have me taught to lute or dance, but it or laid naught, and so on. Well, so long as one pronounces at least some of the final E's, the meter seems to work quite well. That's interesting. That's as far as that isn't. There's no no reference given for that, so that just seems to be an opinion in the middle of an Wikipedia article. Anyway, novelist Hilda Lamb made Hawes a character of a novel, The Willing Heart, published in 1958, where he is fictionally portrayed as an illegitimate son of King Richard III. No contemporary documents support this assumption. So, that's who he was. The true knight. For knighted is not in the feats of war, as for to fight in quarrel right or wrong, but in a cause which truth cannot defer, he ought himself for to make sure and strong, justice to keep mixed with mercy among, and no quarrel a knight ought to take, but for a truth or for a woman's sake. Oh, that was it. That's the true knight. Oh, there's some explanation here for the previous poem. Isaphil, Hopesophil, presumably that's a name to look up. Pomander, a bowl of perfume. Defer, undo, that will be for this one. Coriander, coriander seed and aromatic. Cassandra. Oh. If Cassandra is Cassandra, then that makes me reconsider whether this was supposed to be sarcastic or not. But again, as gentle as Falcon or Hawk of the Tower, that just seems unlikely. I wonder if this was meant sarcastically, but to the author of the anthology that was lost. Anyway, let's read the true knight again. For knighthood is not in the feats of war, as for to fight in quarrel right or wrong, but in a cause which truth cannot defer, he ought himself for to make sure and strong, justice to keep mixed with mercy among, and no quarrel a knight ought to take, but for a truth or for a woman's sake. So that appears to be iambic pentameter, which is very much going to set the tone for future poetry. A lot of iambic pentameter written in the late Tudor period, certainly. And I wonder if we're starting to see it gain dominance here. I wonder if we're, or at least starting to see the very beginnings of that. Other things to know is that this idea, the ideas expressed in this poem of the true knight, I think are probably meant to be taken very literally, and that is because in the Tudor period, particularly, no, in fact, I think it was for the entire Tudor period, certainly Henry VII's and Henry VIII's time, the idea of chivalry was being explored and expounded upon a lot. And I understand that to be because they saw chivalry as some sort of lost ideal, even as far back as then. In the late 14 and early 1500s. And there was a great movement to bring back... there was a lot of retellings of Arthurian legends and so on. Hence why Henry VIII's brother was called Arthur. That was after the King Arthur, who is generally regarded as being a fictional figure, but he still stood as a powerful example of a British king in the popular culture of the time, even if he didn't exist. And, you know, there were, for example, a lot of jousting going on during this period, and there was a lot of etiquette being built up, both in sports, but in also other areas of life and so on, as they were trying to work towards this ideal of chivalry, which they felt had been lost. And it's so notable because, of course, this is right after the War of the Roses. You know, a period when there would have been actual knights on the battlefield, but presumably not acting as chivalrous as people like to imagine they did, looking back on it with rose-tinted spectacles. Anyway, all that is to say that I'm not surprised to see a poem of this subject matter in this period, but it is still very interesting. And you can certainly see how it would have set the stage for later social changes. Stephen Hawes, his epitaph. I wonder if that is actually his epitaph, or if it is an epitaph he wrote. Because people, as far as I'm aware, don't usually write their own epitaph, do they? Still, it seems to be attributed to him, and it's entitled his epitaph. O mortal folk, you may behold and see how I lie here, sometime a mighty night, the end of joy and all prosperity is death at last, thorough his course and might, after the day there cometh the dark night, for though the day be never so long, at last the bell ringeth to even song. Again, we see a lot of the ideas that I'd talked about when analysing the previous poem being repeated here. There's talk of mighty knight and so on in a period when knighthood was very much on the decline. That is in the shining armour sense. The social rank obviously still existed as it does today. And this also looks to be iambic pentameter to me. I'm not sure what more there is to say about this one. Sea and prosperity rhyme, might and night and long and even song do. So there's rhyming couplets, but also rhyming between more separate lines. It's well composed, although I don't recognise the form precisely, though it does seem to have a metre. It's to the point. So yeah, I suppose I'll read that once more and we'll move on. O mortal folk, you may behold and see how I lie here sometime a mighty night, the end of joy and all prosperity. Is death at last, furrow his course and might, after the day there cometh the dark night. For though the day be never so long, at last the bell ringeth to evensong. So, Sir Thomas Wyatt. Who was this then? Slightly later, it would appear. That is, he was born slightly later. Well, and died slightly later. So yes, he was contemporaneous, but he was a younger individual. Sir Thomas Wyatt was a 16th century English politician, ambassador and lyric poet credited with introducing the sonnet to English literature. Okay, that is a big deal. He was born at Allington Castle near Maidenstone in Kent. Though the family was originally from Yorkshire, his family adopted the Lancastrian side in the Wars of the Roses. His mother was Anne Skinner and his father Henry, who had earlier been imprisoned and tortured by Richard III, and been a privy councillor of Henry VII, and remained a trusted advisor when Henry VII ascended the throne in 1509. I think that should probably be ascended to the throne in 1509. Thomas followed his father to court after his education at St. John's College, Cambridge, entering the King's service. He was entrusted with many important diplomatic missions. In public life, his principal patron was Thomas Cromwell. That might be an ancestor of the famous Cromwell, but clearly this was a very long time before the famous Cromwell and the Protectorate and all that. I wonder if it was an ancestor. Still, we're getting off topic. In public life, his principal patron was Thomas Cromwell, after whose death he was recalled from abroad and imprisoned. 1541. Though subsequently acquitted and released, shortly thereafter he died. His poems were circulated at court and may have been published anonymously in the anthology The Court of Venus during his lifetime, but were not published under his name until after his death. The first major book to feature and attribute his verse was Tottle's Miscellanea, printed 15 years after his death. Early life. Thomas Wyatt was born at Allington, Kent in 1503, the son of Sir Henry Wyatt by Anne Skinner, the daughter of John Skinner of Reigate, Surrey. He had a brother Henry, assumed to have died an infant, and sister Margaret, who married Sir Anthony Lee. Died 1549 and was mother of Queen Elizabeth's champion, Sir Henry Lee. Education and diplomatic career. Wyatt was over 6 feet tall and reportedly both handsome and physically strong. He was an ambassador in the service of Henry VIII. But he entered Henry's service in 1515 as sewer extraordinary, and the same year he began studying at St. John's College, Cambridge. His father had been associated with Sir Thomas Boleyn as Constable of Norwich Castle, and Wyatt was thus acquainted with Anne Boleyn. Following a diplomatic mission in Spain in 1526, he accompanied Sir John Russell, 1st Earl of Bedford, to Rome to help petition Pope Clement VII to annul Henry VIII's marriage to Catherine of Aragon, freeing him to marry Anne Boleyn. Russell being incapacitated, Wyatt was also sent to negotiate with the Republic of Venice. According to some, Wyatt was captured by the armies of Emperor Charles V when they captured Rome and imprisoned the Pope in 1527, but he managed to escape and make it back to England. Between 1528 and 1530, Wyatt acted as High Marshal at Calais. In the years following, he continued in Henry's service. He was, however, imprisoned in the Tower of London for a month in 1536, perhaps because Henry hoped he would incriminate the Queen. He was knighted in 1535 and appointed High Sheriff of Kent for 1536. This time he was sent to Spain as ambassador to Charles V, who was offered by the declaration of Prince Mary's illegitimacy. Who was offended by the declaration of Prince Mary's illegitimacy. He was a cousin, and they had once been briefly betrothed. Although Wyatt was unsuccessful in his endeavours and was accused of disloyalty by some of his colleagues, he was protected by his relationships with Cromwell, at least during the latter's lifetime. Wyatt was elected Knight of the Shire MP for Kent in December 1541. Marriage and issue. In 1520, Wyatt married Elizabeth Brooke. A year later, they had a son, Thomas, who led Wyatt's rebellion many years after his father's death. In 1524, Henry VIII assigned Wyatt to be an ambassador at home and abroad, and he separated from his wife soon after on grounds of adultery. Goodness. Wyatt's rebellion was a limited, unsuccessful uprising in England in early 1554, led by 4 men, one of whom was Sir Thomas Wyatt. It was given its name by the solicitor at Wyatt's arraignment, who stated for the record that this shall be ever called Wyatt's Rebellion. Wyatt's poetry and influence. That rebellion, of course, by his son many years later, as the article has already pointed out. Wyatt's professed object was to experiment with the English language, to civilise it, to raise its power to equal those of other European languages. A significant amount of his literary output consists of translations and imitations of sonnets by Italian poet Petrarch. He also wrote sonnets of his own. He took subject matter from Petrarch's sonnets, but his rhyme schemes are significantly different. Petrarch's sonnets consist of an octave rhyming ABBA, followed by a sestet with various rhyme schemes. Wyatt employs the Petrarchan octave, but his most common sestet scheme is CDDCEE. Wyatt experimented in stanza forms, including the rondo, epigrams, terza rima, octava rima songs, and satires, as well as with monorhyme, triplets with refrains, quatrains with different length of line, and rhyme schemes, quatrains with codas, and the French form of douzaine and treizaine. He introduced the Poulter's measure form, rhyming couplets composed of a 12-syllable iambic line, Alexandrian, followed by 14-syllable iambic line, Fortina, and he is considered a master of the iambic tetrameter. Wyatt's poetry reflects classical and Italian models, but he also admired the work of Geoffrey Chaucer, and his vocabulary reflects that of Chaucer. For example, he uses Chaucer's word newfangleness, meaning fickleness, in They Flee From Me. Many of his poems deal with the trials of romantic love and the devotion of the suitor to an unavailable or cruel mistress. Other poems are scathing, satirical indictments of hypocrisy and pandering, required of courtiers who are ambitious to advance at the Tudor court. Wyatt's poems are short but fairly numerous. His 96 love poems appeared posthumously in a compendium called Tottle's Miscellanea. The most noteworthy are 31 sonnets, the first in English. 10 of them were translations from Petrarch, while all were written in Petrarchian form apart from the couplets ending, which Wyatt introduced. Serious and reflective in tone, the sonnets show some stiffness of construction and a metrical uncertainty indicative of the difficulty Wyatt found in the new form. Yet their conciseness represents a great advance on the prolixity and uncouthness of much earlier poetry. Prolixity. Long-windedness and excessive words. Wyatt was also responsible for the important introduction of the personal note into English poetry, for although he followed his models closely, he wrote of his own experiences. His epigrams, songs, and rondo are lighter than the sonnets, and they reveal the care and the elegance typical of the new Romanticism. His satires are composed in the Italian terza-rima, again showing the direction of the innovating tendencies. Interesting. Interesting. So it sounds like he was, in fact, quite significant to the history of English poetry, I mean. So, the lover beseecheth his mistress not to forget his steadfast faith and true intent. So this must be yet another one of these poems Wikipedia mentioned that he wrote, which feature a man seeking the affections of a cruel or unavailable mistress. Forget not yet the tried intent of such a truth as I have meant, my great travails so gladly spent. Forget not yet when first began the weary life ye know since wan. The suits of service none can tell. Forget not yet the great essays, the cruel wrong, the scornful ways, the painful patience in delays. Forget not yet. Forget not, oh forget not this, how long ago hath been and is the mind that never meant amiss. Forget not yet. Forget not then thine own approved, the which so long have thee so loved, whose steadfast faith yet never moved. Forget not this. It's interesting. So it's 3 lines that rhyme in iambic tetrameter, followed by a single repeating line. Forget not yet. Which is in fact a iambic dimeter. Oh, with the final concluding line being forget not this. I think I see what Wikipedia meant by the fact that his forms tended to be a bit stiff and underdeveloped, but yet at the same time very... Well, I suppose I personally can't really judge how innovative they are, but, you know, they certainly seem much more structured than a lot of the poetry we've read already, which is interesting. It suggests that when poetry emerged, English poetry emerged during Chaucer's time, it emerged in a fairly unrefined form, and that it wasn't until this point where we start seeing the structures arising, or at least becoming popularised. Notable if true. Right, what else do we have? The appeal. An earnest suit to his unkind mistress not to forsake him. So again, we have the same theme. And wilt thou leave me thus? Say nay, for shame, to save thee from the blame of all my grief and grame. And wilt thou leave me thus? Say nay, and wilt thou leave me thus, that have loved me thee, that has loved thee so long, in wealth and woe among, and is thy heart so strong? And as to leave me thus, say nay, and wilt thou leave me thus, that have given thee my heart, never for to depart, neither for pain nor smart? And wilt thou leave me thus? Say nay, and wilt thou leave me thus, and have no more pity of him that loveth thee? Alas, thy cruelty! And wilt thou leave me thus? Say nay. Looks like iambic trimeter to me. Not much more to say, given that it repeats most of the same sentiments that the previous poem did. Oh, grame is sorrow. So where it says, of all my grief and grame, that's all my grief and sorrow. Again, we also have sets of 3 lines that rhyme. A revocation. What should I say? Since faith is dead, and truth away from you is fled, should I be led with doubleness? Nay, nay, mistress, I promised you, and you promised me, to be as true as I would be. But since I see your double heart, farewell my part. Fought for to take, 'tis not my mind, but to forsake one so unkind, and as I find, so will I trust, farewell unjust. Can ye say nay, but that you said, that I away should be obeyed, and thus betrayed, or that I wist, farewell unkissed. Okay, this is interesting, because this is to do with a breakup. We haven't read many poems about breakups, have we? Loads about love, plenty about death, plenty that look at the combination of the two. So, a lover that dies before their time and the effect it has on the one they leave behind. Plenty of poems like that. Not many dealing with breakups, I don't think. I notice that most of it is written in an iambic diameter. Although you almost can't tell because there's plenty of trochaic substitution on the initial foot. At which point, when you only have 2 feet per line, the meter itself doesn't really survive, does it? It becomes something altogether different. Still, it's a poem. Certainly I applaud the endeavour. Trying to write an entire poem that makes sense in iambic diameter is no mean feat. Vixi puellis nuper idoneus. I don't know what that means. I'm pretty sure puellis is girl. The rest of it I couldn't tell you. So let's see. Vixi. To live or to reside. Puellis. Yeah, that's a form of girl or maiden. Nuper. Newly, lately, recently, not long ago. Idoneus. Suitable, proper, fit, apt, convenient, sufficient. So what would that mean? Oh, it's a translation of Horace, apparently. Love triumphs are ended. That is not what I was expecting. Puellis is one of the forms of puella, though. As in girl. So I suspect this may be less of a literal translation and more of a translation of the intended meaning. Anyway. So. Vixi puellis nuper idoneus. They flee from me that sometime did me seek, with naked foot stalking within my chamber. Once have I seen them, gentle, tame, and meek, that now are wild and do not once remember, that sometime they have put themselves in danger, to take bread at my hand, and now they range, busily seeking in continual change. Thanked be fortune, it have been otherwise, 20 times better, but once especial, in thin array, after a pleasant guise, when her loose gown did from her shoulders fall, and she me caught in her arms long and small, and therewithal so sweetly did me kiss, and softly said, Dear heart, how like you this? It was no dream, for I lay broad awaking, but all is turned now, through my gentleness, into a bitter fashion of forsaking, and I have leave to go of her goodness, and she also to use newfangledness. But since that I unkindly so am served, how like you this? What have she now deserved? I think this is also referring to a breakup. I could be wrong. Due to his lover being unfaithful, the speaker's lover. The first two lines are very familiar. They flee from me that sometimes did me seek, with naked foot stalking within my chamber. I'm sure I've read that before. What was this author's name? It was something Wyatt, Thomas Wyatt. No, he wasn't included in the previous anthology we read, the 100 Best English Poems, so I have to assume that I must have read it elsewhere. It's a good line though, I think. Most of this appears to be iambic pentameter, I think. Yes, looks like it. So let me read it once more and think. They flee from me that sometime did me seek, with naked foot stalking within my chamber. Once have I seen them gentle, tame, and meek, that now are wild and do not once remember, that sometime they have put themselves in danger, to take bread at my hand, and now they range, bitterly seeking in continual change. My apologies. Thanked be fortune, it hath been otherwise, 20 times better, but once especial, in thin array, after a pleasant guise, when her loose gown did from her shoulder fall, and she me caught in her arms long and small, and therewithal so sweetly did me kiss, and softly said, Dear heart, how like you this? It was no dream, for I lay broad awaking, but all is turned now, through my gentleness, into a bitter fashion of forsaking, and I have leave to go out of her goodness, and she also to use newfangledness. But since that I unkindly so am served, how like you this, and what hath she now deserved? Rhyming couplets as well. Wait, is it? No, it's not. No, this is a sonnet, isn't it? Is it? No. What structure is he using here? I don't recognise the form. I wouldn't be surprised if it was a known form, though. Seven lines per stanza, is it? So it's probably an open form. It's royal rhyme. Sorry, rhyme royal, I should say. Rhyme royal. That's what it is. It's good. It is good, isn't it? Even if it's just in translation. Well, I don't think there's much more to be said about that one. I think its meaning is quite clear and quite well expressed. We've looked at its form. So I think we'll stop there for the poetry and move on to the riddles. So, the riddle that we looked at, the last riddle we looked at last week was 118. From the womb of the earth I challenge my birth, from ladies' fair fingers my frame. I vary as oft as lunar aloft, yet always contain the same. In winter I'm hot, in summer I'm not, yet feel I no great alteration. I play least in sight, as full well I might, in the time of the grand usurpation. I've flesh I must own, without any bone, I've tongue that never spoke any treason, I bear excellent fruit without any root, and always am best in my season. Both Indies do pay by night and by day, they're just tribute into my cavern. In an alehouse I'm poor as the wretch at your door, but always am rich in a tavern. When scarce a day old, I am clammy and cold, but when into a dungeon am turned, I never get sleep, but ever do weep, for fear of my sides being burned. As soon as released, I away to a feast, and drink some more wine ere I die, then straight disappear, and come no more there. What a whimsical creature am I. And the answer to that was a mince pie. So, first new riddle. Or first riddle we haven't encountered yet, I should say. This is 119. In a small state, not only by their stars, prone to contend but doomed to civil wars, I act a part, with proper talents blessed, a courtier from my finery confessed. Long with an equal fate I sought renown, slave by turns to fortune's smile and frown. Here I engaged with credit, there with shame, nor hoped to share above a common fame. With strange effects a slender cause affords, the magic force of sound and power of words. Few letters placed with art a title give, from whence I great authority derive. Secure of conquest, now I take the field. At my approach, the stoutest heart must yield. In vain the great their boasted ensigns plead, together fall the sceptre and the spade. But as no mortal glories are sincere, and clouds obscure our brightest moments here, though no ill-thought air harboured in my breast, though to all parties I'm a welcome guest, though just applause my victories proclaim, yet infamy and scorn attend my name. Interesting. In a small state, not only by their stars, prone to contend but doomed to civil wars. I act a part, with proper talents blessed, a courtier from my finery confessed. So it has finery. Long with unequal fate I sought renown, a slave by turns to fortune's smile and frown. Here I engaged with credit, there with shame, nor hoped to share above a common fame. What strange effects a slender cause affords, the magic force of sound and power of words. Few letters placed with art, a title give, from whence I great authority derive. Interesting. Secure of conquest, now I take the field. At my approach the stoutest heart must yield. In vain the great their boasted ensigns plead, together for the sceptre and the spade. But as no mortal glories are sincere, and clouds obscure our brightest moments here, though no ill thought e'er forebode in my breast, though to all parties I'm a welcome guest, though just applause my victories proclaim, yet infamy and scorn attend my name. So it has finery, it appears to have a title, and when it approaches the stoutest heart must yield. In a small state, not only by their stars, prone to contend but doomed to civil wars, I act a part. With proper talents blessed, a courtier from my finery confessed, Long with an equal fate I sought renown, a slave by turns to fortune smile and frown. Here I engage with credit, there with shame, nor hope to share above a common fame. What strange effects a slender cause affords, the magic force of sound and power of words. Few letters placed with art a title give, from whence I great authority derive. Secure of conquest, now I take the field, and my approach the stoutest heart must yield. In vain the great their boasted ensigns plead, together fall the sceptre and the spade. But as no mortal glories are sincere, and clouds obscure our brightest moments here, though no ill thought ever harboured in my breast, though to all parties I'm a welcome guest, though just applause my victories proclaim, yet infamy and scorn attend my name. The only thing I can think is maybe a doctor, which I'm not confident about at all. But it would explain why they're slaves to fortune, smile and frown. It would explain why it's talking about a few letters placed with art a title give, the title of doctor. The stoutest heart must yield, because they're not there to fight a doctor. Though no ill thought ever harboured in my breast due to the Hippocratic oath, although to be fair, that doesn't fully figure. That doesn't mean that a doctor couldn't harbour an ill thought. What about a priest? In a small state, not only by their stars, prone to contend but doomed to civil wars, I act a part. With proper talents blessed, a courtier from my finery confessed, long with an equal fate I sought renown, a slave by turns to fortune smile and frown. Here I engage with credit, there with shame, nor hope to share above a common fame. What strange effects a slender cause affords, the magic force of sound and power of words. Few letters placed with art a title give, from whence I great authority derive. Secure of conquest, now I take the field, and my approach the stoutest heart must yield. In vain the great their boasted ensigns plead, together fall the sceptre and the spade. But as no mortal glories are sincere, and clouds obscure our brightest moments here, though no ill thought ever harboured in my breast, though to all parties I'm a welcome guest, though just applause my victories proclaim, yet infamy and scorn attend my name. Honestly, I don't know. I'm going to have to look this one up, sadly. Nope, we don't want that. Aha. So what we're on, 118. No, 119. Knave of clubs. I wouldn't know. That means nothing to me. Okay, that's a shame. Okay, 120. First in the court of kings I take my birth. Dispatched from thence I ravage all the earth. Over sea and land I bear a lawless sway. Revel in blood to make humankind my prey. And slay 10,000 victims in a day. Under the reign of my sworn enemy. Oh, I first was born, my birth soon made her die. Though love and hatred of our good and ill, we do each other both create and kill. The ingenious nymph who first reveals my name shall be recorded in the book of fame. Could it be a disease that was thought to emanate from a royal court at some point? 10,000 victims in a day is a lot if it's meant to be taken literally, especially in those times. I mean, apart from a disease, what could it be? Poverty? Famine? Prejudice? Gonna have to pass again. War. Oh, of course it would be. That was foolish of me. First in the court of kings I take my birth, dispatch from thence I ravage all the earth, over seas and land I bear a lawless sway, revel in blood, make humankind my prey, and slay 10,000 victims in a day. Under the reign of my sworn enemy, I first was born, my birth soon made her die. Though love and hatred of our good and ill, we do each other both create and kill. The ingenious nymph who first reveals my name shall be recorded in the book of fame. War, of course. Okay, so 121. Room for your slave and engineer the more, that never appeared in masquerade before. You know me well, a little nimble fellow. You seem dressed up in blue, red, brown or yellow. I'm sometimes with, sometimes without a head. For champion-like, from wounds my glory spread. Thus mangled as my body shorter grows, my tailor in proportion cuts my clothes, which urchin-like hide all except my nose. Though my complexion is blacker than a shoe, my mistress has a skin as white as snow. In soft caresses there each charm I trace, and mend the native beauties of her face. This is some sort of makeup then? Till a more powerful rival fills my place. Her province is to crown what I begun. I then resign the honours I have won, extinguished like a taper in the sun. Thus doomed to silence shades my labours lie, embalmed and buried in obscurity. White o'er the tomb surprising trophies lie, and cheerful nature triumph in disguise. Even thus provoked, my loyalty the same, unshaken if I win or lose the game. To quit or gain my point, I ply the oar, and revel like a drunken tar on shore. Till by degrees I've lavished all my store. Ye sons of art that owe me for their friend, discard me when they find I've naught to spend. Though for their sakes I've toiled the life of man, if, as the psalmists say, 'tis but a span. See, thus it says, thus mangled as my body shorter grows, my tailor in proportion cuts my clothes. That sounded like a pencil. And then it mentioned about using it to mend the native beauties of her face. Sounds like some sort of makeup that's being used up. But I don't know what they would have used. Could it just be graphite? Let's find out. Lead pencil. So, I had the right idea. Do they mean actual lead, though? Oh, according to Wikipedia, chemistry was in its infancy and the substance was thought to be a form of lead. That is graphite. So I did actually get it. I didn't realise they were using it on their faces, mind you. Until now. Oh, in blue, red, brown or yellow, that must be the coloured wood that goes around it. So they must have had pencils very much like ours a long time ago. Oh, well, I'm happy about that. That may only be one of 3, but still, I got one right. Which, I'm not always so lucky to do. So, I think we'll call it there for tonight. Thank you for coming, everyone. I hope you enjoyed the stream. I'll be streaming again on Friday, Saturday, and Monday, in which I will be doing more Disco Elysium, at least until the game's finished. If I manage to finish the game in that span, then maybe I'll have to move on to something else, I don't know. Well, I will have to move on to something else, but I don't know if I'll finish Disco Elysium that quickly or not. Then next Wednesday we're back round to, well, at least poetry and riddles, possibly some other novel to read if I think of something and get that sorted in time. And want to. Otherwise it will be extra poetry like it was this week. Anyway, once again, thank you for coming. I hope you all have a wonderful night, and good night.